Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know we love to get our hands dirty and dig into some seriously interesting topics, and today we're diving into the world of aquaculture. You've been asking us about this for a while, wanting to know about the history of aquaculture, its environmental impacts, and how to actually find sustainably farmed fish. And we're here to deliver. Get this, from 1970 to 2008, aquaculture production grew at a rate of like 8.3% each year.
Wow.
That's massive compared to less than 2% growth in fisheries and 2.9% for livestock. So aquaculture is booming. We're going to uncover some surprising facts today about mangrove forests and how vital they are. Also, the efficiency of fish compared to cows and chickens. And we're going to navigate the sometimes confusing world of sustainable seafood certifications.
Sounds like we have a lot to unpack. And yeah, I think aquaculture is often taken for granted, but it's a critical part of our food system for sure.
For sure. To kick things off, let's go back in time. When we talk about aquaculture, it feels very modern, but I'm guessing it's been around longer than we think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Aquaculture might seem like a recent trend, but it's actually been around for centuries. We're talking thousands of years. There's evidence of fish farming in China going as far back as 3500 BC.
Wow.
And even the ancient Romans cultivated oysters. They weren't just gathering them from the wild.
Wow, that's ancient history. But it makes sense, doesn't it? As the human population grows, we need reliable sources of food, and the oceans can only provide so much.
And oceans actually contribute less than 2% of the food humans consume.
Really?
So aquaculture has a huge role to play in feeding the world, especially as wild fish stocks are increasingly under pressure.
Okay, so aquaculture has a long and interesting history. But let's be honest, it has a bit of a mixed reputation when it comes to its environmental impact. One of the biggest concerns I hear about is the destruction of mangrove forests.
Yeah, for sure. That's a significant issue. While aquaculture can be a sustainable way to produce food, it's definitely had some negative impacts on the environment, and mangrove forests have been particularly hard hit.
Before we go further, can we just talk about why these mangrove forests are so important? I feel like a lot of people might not understand what's at stake here.
Absolutely. Mangrove forests are like the superheroes of coastal ecosystems. They act as nurseries for tons of fish and shellfish, many of which end up on our plates. So damaging mangroves has a ripple effect on wild fisheries, too.
Oh, wow. It's all interconnected, isn't it?
And it doesn't stop there. Mangroves are incredible filters. They clean coastal waters by absorbing pollutants and excess nutrients. Plus, those dense root systems protect coastlines from erosion. And we know that's a growing problem with rising sea levels and climate change.
Okay, mangroves are clearly essential. But how exactly has aquaculture impacted them?
Well, to make space for shrimp farms. Vast areas of mangrove forests have been cleared in certain parts of the world. For example, in Thailand, between 1975 and 1993, shrimp farming wiped out over 144,000 hectares of mangrove forests.
144,000 hectares. That's hard to even visualize.
Think about this. That's the size of almost 300,000 football fields, all gone, just for shrimp farms. Wow.
Sadly, this isn't limited to Thailand. Millions of hectares of mangroves have been converted to shrimp farms globally.
That's pretty alarming. It makes you think about the trade-offs, right? We need to produce enough food, but not at the expense of vital ecosystems like mangroves.
It's a delicate balance, for sure.
Right.
And there are definitely ways to do aquaculture more responsibly, which we can discuss a bit later.
Okay, good. Because I'm already having second thoughts about my shrimp tacos. But before we dive into solutions, let's talk about feed conversion. I've heard that fish are incredibly efficient at converting feed into protein compared to, say, cows or chickens.
So when you look at what's called the feed conversion ratio, or FCR, it does seem that way. This ratio measures how much feed you need to produce a certain amount of animal weight.
So the lower the FCR, the more efficient the animal.
Precisely. And fish generally have much lower FCRs than land animals. To give you some examples, beef cattle have FCRs somewhere between 6 and 10.
Pigs are a bit better, ranging from 2.7 to 5. And chickens are even more efficient with FCRs between 1.7 and 2. Now, farmed fish and shrimp typically have FCRs between 1 and 2.4. So at first glance, it looks like fish are the champions of efficiency.
So fish are like the superheroes of feed conversion.
Well, not so fast. FCR gives us a starting point, but it's not the whole picture. There's a newer, more accurate way to measure efficiency. That considers the protein and calorie retention in the edible parts of the animal.
That makes sense. After all, we don't eat the whole fish, just like we don't eat a whole cow or chicken.
Right. And when you use this more precise measurement, things get a little more interesting. Chickens are actually the most efficient, followed by Atlantic salmon. And surprisingly, some farmed fish like tilapia and prawns are closer in efficiency to beef than chicken.
Wait, so some fish are as inefficient as cows. That's a bit of a shocker. What's going on there?
It comes down to a couple of things. First, the protein needs of fish and shrimp are often higher than those of land animals. They need more protein-rich feed, which increases the resources needed to produce them.
So it's not just about how much they eat, but what they eat.
Right. Plus, the edible portion of some seafood, like prawns and tilapia, is lower than we might think. So you end up discarding a larger percentage of their body compared to, say, a chicken breast.
Okay, I see. So while FCR is a useful starting point, we need to understand how efficiently different animals convert feed into edible food. This is definitely making me think differently about my seafood choices.
That's the goal, to help you make informed decisions. Speaking of which, let's talk about how you can actually find sustainable aquaculture products. It can be a bit confusing out there with all the labels and certifications.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a minefield sometimes. Are there any specific certifications we should be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. There are certifications that can help guide you towards responsible choices. Two of the most reputable ones are the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, or ASC, and Best Aquaculture Practices, known as BAP.
ASC, BAP, got it. But what exactly do these certifications mean?
The ASC is a globally recognized program that sets standards for responsible aquaculture practices. Think minimizing environmental impact, ensuring good working conditions, and engaging with local communities.
That sounds pretty comprehensive. What about BAP?
BAP focuses on a similar set of values, promoting environmental and social responsibility throughout the entire aquaculture supply chain, from hatcheries and feed mills to processing plants and farms. They're really looking at the big picture.
Okay, so they both sound great in theory. But practically speaking, how do I actually find these certified products when I'm at the store? I don't want to spend hours deciphering labels in the seafood aisle.
You don't have to. Many supermarkets now clearly label seafood with these certifications. Keep an eye out for the ASC or BAP logos, and you can always do some research online. There are websites that list specific brands and companies known for their sustainability efforts.
That's reassuring. It's good to know there are resources available to help us make better choices.
Knowledge is power when it comes to supporting sustainable practices.
I'd love to know more about those companies that are really leading the way in sustainable aquaculture. Are there any specific farms or brands that kind of stand out?
Oh, absolutely. There are some incredible companies out there pushing the boundaries of sustainability. One that comes to mind is Verlasso Salmon. They've really committed to reducing their environmental footprint. They use a unique farming method that drastically reduces the amount of fish meal in their feed.
Less fish meal, that's a good thing, right?
Fish meal is often made from wild-caught fish. So reducing our reliance on it helps to alleviate pressure on those wild fish stocks.
Right.
Verlasso also strategically farms in areas with strong currents, which helps to naturally disperse waste and minimize pollution.
Clever. So they're working with nature rather than against it. That's impressive. Any other examples you can share?
Another one worth checking out is Kvari Arctic Salmon. They're a family-run business in Norway that focuses on low-density farming. They use a special diet that's rich in algae, which is a much more sustainable alternative to traditional fish oil.
Kvari Arctic, I'll have to look for that one. So it sounds like we as consumers have a lot more power than we realize. By choosing to support companies like Verlasso and Kvari Arctic, we can encourage more sustainable practices throughout the industry.
Absolutely. Every choice we make sends a message to producers.
I love that. But it's not just about choosing the right brands, is it? What else can we do as individuals to promote responsible aquaculture?
Well, spreading the word is incredibly important. Talk to your friends and family about the importance of sustainable seafood. Share articles and documentaries on social media. Support organizations that are working hard to promote better practices. It all makes a difference.
It's amazing how much impact we can have just by talking about these issues and raising awareness.
So those conversations really do matter. But there's one more angle we haven't touched on yet. Variety. One of the best things you can do for the health of our oceans is to diversify your seafood choices.
Wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to be focusing on farm seafood. How does eating a variety of seafood tie into that?
It's all connected. By branching out and trying different types of seafood, including those lesser-known species, you're helping to reduce pressure on the popular overfish stocks, and that takes some of the burden off aquaculture to fill the gap.
I see. It's not just about choosing farmed or wild. It's about creating a more balanced and sustainable seafood system overall.
Precisely. And that's where things get really interesting. Because it goes beyond our individual choices. We need to start thinking about systemic change. And I think one of the biggest levers for change is government policy.
Okay, so we're talking about the P word, but I do get it. Policies like create the framework for the whole industry, right?
Yeah, they set the stage for sure. Governments can incentivize sustainable practices, establish strict environmental regulations, and invest in research to advance responsible aquaculture. They have a lot of power to shape the future of the industry.
So what kind of policies should we be pushing for? Let's get specific.
Okay, well, first and foremost, we need regulations that protect sensitive ecosystems like those mangrove forests we talked about.
No more clearing mangroves for shrimp farms.
Exactly. We also need policies that encourage the adoption of innovative, sustainable farming practices. Things like IMTA, which we touched on earlier. Imagine if governments offered financial incentives to farmers who integrate seaweeds or shellfish into their operations.
Well, that's a great idea. Reward the innovators. What about the issue of feed? We talked about how the reliance on fish meal is a problem.
A big one. And governments can play a major role here. They can support the development and use of sustainable alternatives like algae-based feeds or insect meal.
Insect meal, huh?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm ready for that. But if it's good for the planet, I'm willing to keep an open mind.
It might sound strange now, but these alternative feeds are gaining traction. Another critical area for policy intervention is waste management.
Yeah, we definitely don't want fish farms polluting our waters.
No, we don't. We need strict limits on nutrient discharge and incentives for developing closed-loop systems that minimize waste. Think recirculating aquaculture systems or new technologies that can treat and reuse wastewater.
Wow, it sounds like there's so much potential for innovation. It feels almost optimistic.
It is exciting, and governments can play a key role in fostering that innovation. Think research grants for waste management solutions, tax breaks for companies investing in sustainable technologies, or public-private partnerships to tackle these challenges.
We've talked about a lot of challenges, but this is starting to sound more like an opportunity, a chance to rethink the entire system and make it truly sustainable. But it's going to take a shift in mindset, not just from governments, but from the industry as a whole.
You're absolutely right. We need to move away from simply maximizing production and embrace a more holistic approach that prioritizes environmental health, social responsibility, and long-term sustainability.
So how do we get everyone on board with this vision?
Well, a lot of it comes down to consumer demand. We've already talked about making informed choices at the supermarket, but we also need to use our voices.
So it's not just about voting with our wallets, but speaking up about what we want to see.
Exactly. Let your elected officials know that responsible aquaculture matters to you. Support organizations that are fighting for change. Reach out to companies and let them know you're looking for sustainable products.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease, as they say.
And never underestimate the power of collaboration. We need open dialogues between industry stakeholders, scientists, policymakers, and consumers.
Yeah, because working together is always better than working in silos.
Imagine industry roundtables where farmers can share best practices, research collaborations that lead to new innovations, and consumer forums where people can learn about aquaculture and share their concerns.
It sounds like we're talking about a whole new era of aquaculture, one that's transparent, accountable, and genuinely sustainable.
We are. The challenges are significant. But so are the opportunities. By working together, we can create a future where aquaculture nourishes both people and the planet.
That's a future I want to be a part of. So listeners, I have a challenge for you. Now that you're armed with all this knowledge, how will you use it to make a difference?
Yeah, think about the choices you make at the grocery store, the conversations you have with friends and family, and the actions you take to advocate for a better future.
Because even small ripples can create big waves of change. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of aquaculture. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.